It was a quiet afternoon in the suburbs when 9-year-old Emily took off on her pink bike, just like she had 100 times before. Her mom waved from the porch, expecting her back before dinner. But as the sun dipped below the trees and the streetlights flickered on, there was no sign of Emily. The bike trail she loved so much led into a wooded path near the edge of town, and that was the last anyone ever saw of her. No sounds, no clues, just silence. A missing persons report was filed within hours, and for days, search parties combed every inch of the neighborhood. But Emily had vanished, as if the ground swallowed her whole. 12 years passed. Her parents moved but never stopped hoping. The case went cold, and the town quietly moved on, leaving only a fading photo on a telephone pole and whispers of what might have happened. Then, a twist no one could have predicted. A young couple began renovations on a rundown house just 5 miles from where Emily disappeared. While tearing down an old wall in the basement, they stumbled upon something buried deep behind the wooden panels, something that made them freeze in place. What they found not only reopened the case, but sent shockwaves through the community. Who owned the house before? Why was this hidden so carefully? And most chilling of all, what did it mean about Emily's last moments? The answers, when revealed, would leave everyone stunned. The couple, Mark and Jenna, had just bought the old fixer-upper with plans to start fresh. The house had stood empty for nearly a decade, tucked away at the edge of town, surrounded by overgrown hedges and forgotten by most. As they pulled apart dusty paneling in the basement, expecting to deal with mold or maybe an old mouse nest, they instead uncovered something far more disturbing: a child's backpack, faded and dusty, zipped tight. Inside were worn sneakers, a cracked plastic hairbrush, and a school ID card with the name Emily Parker. Mark stared in disbelief while Jenna's hands trembled. Emily's photo, though aged and blurred, was unmistakable. The discovery immediately brought back a flood of local memories: the missing posters, candlelight vigils, and unanswered prayers. The house, once just a structure with creaky floors and leaky pipes, was now part of a long-unsolved mystery. Police were called within the hour, and the site quickly turned from a construction zone to a sealed-off investigation. As news broke, neighbors gathered outside, whispering who had lived there before. Records showed a string of short-term renters and a man who left town abruptly in 2012, right around the time renovations were started but never finished. No one knew him well. He kept to himself, worked night shifts, and moved without saying goodbye. Tensions rose as police sifted through the basement, uncovering more hidden items sealed in the walls. Each object brought new questions. And what started as home renovations was now the center of a chilling mystery. As investigators dug deeper, more strange details began to surface. Behind another section of the basement wall, they found an old cassette recorder wrapped in plastic. The tape inside was worn, barely playable, but fragments of a child's voice could still be heard, soft, shaky, and afraid. Detectives worked day and night to enhance the audio, hoping it would offer any real lead, while neighbors struggled to understand how something like this could have gone unnoticed for so long. Emily's parents, now older and more guarded, were pulled back into a nightmare they had tried for years to live past. Her father, David, had never stopped looking. He kept her room exactly the same, her drawings still taped to the wall, her last birthday card still on her shelf. When he learned about the discovery, he drove straight to the house, parking across the street and just staring, not ready to face what it might all mean. News cameras began crowding the block, digging up old footage and interviewing anyone who had lived nearby during the time of Emily's disappearance. Then came a second twist. Jenna remembered something odd from when they first toured the house. A heavy padlock on the attic door rusted shut. They hadn't thought much of it, assuming it was just storage. But now, the question loomed: what could be up there? And why had it been sealed? As authorities prepared to open the attic, the air grew heavier. Everyone braced for answers, but deep down feared what they might finally find. The attic door creaked as police forced it open. Dust billowed down the narrow stairs, thick and untouched, as if the space hadn't been entered in years. Officers moved cautiously, flashlights cutting through the shadows. The room was empty at first. Glanced just insulation, broken beams, and old boxes. But in one far corner, tucked behind a pile of forgotten furniture, was a wooden chest sealed with nails. The silence grew heavier as they pried it open. Meanwhile, David waited outside in his car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. He had spent years imagining what had happened to his daughter, both hoping and dreading the day he might finally know. His heart pounded with each passing minute. Reporters hovered nearby, careful not to cross the crime scene tape, whispering theories about the former tenant and the strange objects already recovered from the basement. Inside the attic, investigators began pulling out old photographs, a few toys, and a water-damaged notebook with childlike drawings. On one page, a heart drawn in crayon with the word Dad underneath. The lead detective signaled for forensics to handle everything with care. What they were dealing with now wasn't just a missing person case, was something deeper, possibly darker. Then came the twist. One officer found a false panel in the attic floor. Beneath it, more space narrow, hidden. It hadn't shown up in the original blueprints. As flashlights pointed down, the tension exploded. Whatever was inside, it had been kept secret for over a decade. And now, it was about to be uncovered. The hidden compartment beneath the attic floor was no more than 3 feet deep. But what it contained shifted the investigation entirely. Wrapped in plastic and wedged between old insulation were dozens of Polaroid photos, faded, yellowed, and eerie in their stillness. Some were of Emily, unmistakable even after all these years, her wide eyes staring blankly at the lens. But others, they showed children no one recognized, different faces, different time periods, all photographed in the same dimly lit basement, with the same worn-out wallpaper in the background. Detectives stood frozen. This wasn't just about Emily anymore. This house, long forgotten and sold off without question, now pointed to something far more unsettling: potential serial abduction case hidden in plain sight. The man who once lived here, the quiet loner from 2012, had left behind more than just dust. Police quickly began cross-referencing the faces in the photos with old missing children cases. Several matched, most were still open investigations. From surrounding towns. Outside, David was told gently but urgently that the scope of the case had expanded. He listened in stunned silence, the air around him thick with dread. Mark and Jenna, the new homeowners, were in disbelief. What began as a hopeful renovation had spiraled into something unimaginable. The neighborhood was locked down, more detectives called in, and news vans lined the street. Then came the final jolt. A neighbor, long retired, came forward and said she'd seen something strange back in 2010, a girl at the attic window. But the house was supposed to be empty. As detectives reviewed the neighbor's statement, everything began falling into place. Her account of seeing a girl in the attic window around the time Emily had vanished was no longer just a forgotten memory. It was the missing link. Investigators pulled the property records again and discovered a name they had missed before: Jonathan Keene, a contractor who had briefly rented the house before disappearing without a trace. Digging deeper, they found Keene's name tied to multiple properties, all abandoned or quickly sold off. In nearly every case, a child had gone missing nearby. Forensics confirmed items found in the attic and basement, including the notebook and backpack, all traced back to Emily and at least 3 other missing children. The attic space had been used as a holding area, sealed off and carefully hidden. But the twist no one saw coming came when the last Polaroid photo was digitally restored. It showed Emily older, maybe 16, looking directly into the camera. That photo was taken years after she vanished. This meant she had been alive well beyond the initial search period. A search was launched for Keene, now presumed to be living under an alias. But in a final, chilling moment, a call came in from a storage facility across state lines. A unit, rented under Keene's old ID, had been flagged for unpaid fees. Inside were more personal effects, along with a worn spiral journal. The last entry was dated 2 years ago, and it was signed Emily. She had survived. The question now was, where was she? The discovery of the journal changed everything. Inside were pages filled with Emily's handwriting stories, memories, and detailed accounts of the years she had spent in captivity. Though much of it was painful to read, one thing was clear: Emily had found a way to survive. Her words hinted at moments of hope, escape attempts, and even brief interactions with people she called the kind ones. Most shocking of all was the final entry. It spoke of her escape and how she had chosen not to return immediately, fearing no one would believe her or that her captors still watched from a distance. She wrote about starting over, quietly blending into life in another small town, trying to build something of her own.